Okay, so welcome everyone to our August webinar. I'm your moderator for today. My name's Eric and I'm the treasurer of ITE-ANZ. We'll be talking about gender impact assessments today, and we've got Bonnie Coogan joining us. Before we start, I'd like to pay our respects to the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first inhabitants of the nation and the traditional custodians of the lands in which we live, learn and work. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and respect the Treaty of the Waitangi and Maori as the original people of Aotearoa and New Zealand. And we acknowledge people of Indigenous descent who are with us today. Quick introduction for those who've not heard of us before. We're a professional body of like-minded individuals with a passion for all things transport. ITE is an international organization that's based in the US and with many branches across the world, including Australia and New Zealand. Membership with us entitles you not only to events in Australia and New Zealand, but also events and webinars internationally, and plenty of opportunity to learn from other jurisdictions as well. We always welcome new members, so if you're interested in getting involved, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or through our socials following this session. Our socials are down the bottom, so we've got Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website as well. I'd also like to take some time to say thank you to our sponsors, who without them, we wouldn't be able to host free events such as these. Austraffic is our platinum sponsor. Traffic Works sponsors our student award. Sidra Solutions sponsors our President's Dinner and Postgraduate Award. Lindsay Oxlade Consulting sponsors our Emerging Professionals Award. And we've got 3 corporate sponsors through O'Brien Traffic, Arup, and Movement and Place Consulting. We are always open to new sponsors. So if you or your company are interested in sponsoring our events, please reach out to either myself or through our socials. Today, we have Bonnie from Melton City Council to speak to us about gender impact assessments. Bonnie is a public health professional with a Bachelor of Health Science focused in health promotion and physical activity and health from Deakin University. She is an experienced practitioner with a demonstrated history of working in the community health sector, primary care partnership sector, and local government. Currently, Bonnie works as a gender equality officer at Melton City Council. And lastly, just some housekeeping before I hand over to Bonnie. Just a reminder for everyone to remain on mute for the duration of the session. If you have any technical issues, please send it through the chat function in your taskbar, should be up the top or the bottom. And then there'll be some time for Q&A after the presentation. So please click on that button and post your questions, and we'll run through that at the end of the presentation. So now I'll hand over to Bonnie for her to run her presentation. Please take away, Bonnie.
Thank you, Eric, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to pop my presentation up on the screen. And looks like that's working. So I will kick off, but before I do, I'll just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting on today. I'm on the land of the Wadawurrung people, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak with you today. I feel very fortunate to be able to speak to just one example of some exciting work that's happening here in Victoria in the gender equality space at the moment. As you've already heard, my name's Bonnie. I'm the Gender Equality Officer at Melton City Council in Victoria, Australia. Today, I'm going to be presenting on the Victorian Gender Equality Act and what it's meant for our council. And also, I'll be giving you a rundown of a completed gender impact assessment on our pedestrian and cyclist plan. And this has been a piece of work that's been completed in conjunction with our engineering department. And I want to thank my colleague, Michael Smith, who has been working on this with me. As Eric said, please feel free to use the Q&A function throughout the presentation, and I'll do my best to answer your questions when we get to the end. Just to make you aware, I will be mentioning some topics today in the presentation that relate to family violence and violence against women, and that may be upsetting for some. So if at any time, if you need assistance, please contact 1-800-RESPECT if you are in Australia, and that phone number is at the bottom of the screen there. So that's 1-800-737-732. That's 1-800-737-732. This is what we'll be talking about today. I'll be giving you an overview about the City of Melton, some demographic and geographical information for those who may not be familiar. How did we get here? And that'll be a bit of background on the gender equality work that's happened in Victoria over the last few years. A bit about the Gender Equality Act itself and deliverables that we need to complete under the Act. A little bit of background on the pedestrian and cyclist plan, the process we undertook to complete our gender impact assessment, and the next steps for the plan as well. So as I said, for those who may not be familiar, the City of Melton, we are located in outer Western Melbourne in Victoria. So we're about 40 kilometres west of the CBD. And you can see on the screen there, all of the suburbs that are within that black border make up the City of Melton for now. And I say for now because we are a municipality that's experiencing rapid growth, and we are one of the fastest growing local government areas in the state. By 2051, we're expected to have almost 500,000 people living in the area. And I know that statistic was from the 2016 census, so it may have even increased with the latest census data that came out earlier, or last month actually. As you'd be well aware, this rapid growth has a big impact on infrastructure and active transport for the municipality. So it's really topical when we're talking about this topic today. There are probably some people in the room, in the virtual room, that are wondering where the Gender Equality Act has come from, especially if you are outside of Victoria. So the purpose of this slide is to let you know that it hasn't come out of nowhere, and Victoria is really leading the rest of the country in this space. The Victorian state government has committed a lot of resources and money to tackling gender inequality and violence against women. There have been a series of high-profile family violence-related deaths in Victoria. And most notably, in 2014, there was the death of 11-year-old Luke Batty, who was killed by his father after years of abusive behaviour directed at Luke's mother, Rosie Batty. And I'm sure quite a few people have probably heard of Rosie before. Rosie has been a staunch family violence advocate since her son's death, and she's also been a past Australian of the Year. A frightening statistic to note is that in Australia, on average, one woman is killed by a current or former partner every week. So it is a really serious problem, and it's one that is not going away fast enough. And these unfortunate events set the scene for the Royal Commission into Family Violence in 2015. 227 recommendations came out of that Royal Commission, and the Victorian government has committed to implementing every single one of them. And one of these recommendations was that Victoria needs to address gender inequality in order to reduce family violence and all forms of violence against women. In response, the state government released Victoria's first gender equality strategy, Safe and Strong, which was in 2016. As part of that strategy, the government committed to legislative change to promote gender equality. And after much consultation with all forms of government, the family violence sector, community organisations and many others, the Gender Equality Act came into effect at the end of March last year. And I just want to highlight that Victoria is the only state in Australia to have introduced a piece of legislation of this scale, and they've really set a precedent for the other states and the Commonwealth government to hopefully follow in time. As you can see on the screen here, there are many benefits of gender equality, and these benefits also underpin the Act. And ones I normally like to point out to my colleagues in other areas of council are that gender equality benefits all Victorians regardless of our gender. Gender equality brings significant economic, social and health benefits for the state. And advancing gender equality is a shared responsibility across the Victorian community, so we all have a role to play in promoting gender equality. As council, we're the level of government that's closest to the community, and we can play a pivotal role in promoting gender equity and preventing violence against women. Council can lead the societal change through the services that we deliver, our organisational structure and operations, and most importantly, through leadership in the community. There are many opportunities to promote gender equity across a wide range of our council responsibilities, and these include capital works, emergency management, maternal and child health, the management of libraries and sporting grounds, and through our organisational policies and procedures. And also council are really large employers in their community. In our case in Melton, we've got over 800 employees and many of our staff work and live in the municipality. Moving on to the Gender Equality Act. So the Act applies to organisations in the public sector with over 50 employees. And some of these organisations include local councils like ourselves, health services and hospitals, universities, and state government departments such as the Department of Transport. My role as the Gender Equality Officer is to support the organisation to fulfil its obligations under the Act and to work with all staff across all departments to do the things that are on the top of the slide there, to take positive action towards achieving gender equality within the organisation and externally in community-facing policies, programs and services. So what that really boils down to is supporting staff to understand how gender can be considered and how it is impacted by the service they are providing to the community. So for example, if council is wanting to advocate to the state government about having more bus routes and more bus stops, it's really important to consider where is it appropriate to have the bus stops around the community? Are they in well-lit spots? Is there lighting that's already there? Does lighting need to go in? Are they in isolated spots? Are people going to feel safe getting off a bus if there's no one else around? Is there shelter at the bus stop? Is there any antisocial behaviour that's happening in that area that may decrease people's perceptions of safety and prevent them from catching the bus at certain times of the day? So I really see my role as prompting staff with questions so they can think more deeply about how their services will impact different people in our community. There are a number of deliverables and things that we need to do to fulfil our obligations under the Act. The first one there, we've conducted a workplace gender audit. We've developed a gender equality action plan. We're promoting gender equality in our policies, programs and services. And one way we can do that is by completing gender impact assessments. We're implementing our gender equality action plan and we're publicly reporting on our progress. And how that's working at Melton is that these deliverables sit within our community planning department, which I am part of, and also our people and culture or our human resources department. So the previous iteration of the pedestrian and cyclist plan was the integrated transport strategy, and that was in 2015. And that was all about improving the existing infrastructure and planning for infrastructure to increase active travel for cyclists and pedestrians. So that was achieved by identifying barriers, consulting with the community on identified projects, and collaborating with relevant departments across council to ensure consistent and appropriate outcomes. And these are the 5 C's that underpin the latest iteration of the plan. I'm sure you're much more familiar with these than I am, but we've got catchment there, connectivity, crash safety, comfort, and community. So moving on to gender impact assessments, and as part of the Act, council is required to complete gender impact assessments on all of our policies, programs and services that have a direct and significant impact on the community. And you would be aware we have a lot of those policies in place and programs and services. We have a lot of far-reaching services. If you're wondering what a gender impact assessment is, that's a really great question. Basically, a gender impact assessment, or a GIA, as I'll be referring to it, as it's a way to critically think about how, in this case, the pedestrian and cyclist plan meets the different needs of women, men, and gender diverse people in our community. The projects that the engineering department have on their prioritisation list for cycling and walking do have a direct and significant impact on the community. So we determined that a GIA needed to be completed, and we went about completing that with the resources and tools that our council has developed. We are aware that people of different genders don't always experience the same things when they are walking and cycling around Melton. And this GIA helped us to understand what those differences were in order to properly inform the identified projects and also areas of work to focus on. This slide is a summary of our GIA steps that were taken to complete the GIA. I met with engineering prior to them undertaking the community consultation for their plan, and we found that the earlier you can do a GIA, the better really, as it enabled them to ensure they considered gender early in their planning process, rather than considering it at the end when it's often too late and it's really difficult or impossible to retrofit plans and designs. The first step was to define the purpose and who it most affects. So the purpose of the plan and the consultation was to identify barriers to walking and cycling within our municipality and to implement a prioritised list of solutions to make walking and cycling safe, convenient and accessible for all users. The next step involved looking at how different genders, people of different genders walk or cycle. So it was identified that all people of all genders use our pedestrian and cyclist networks for active transport and recreation. However, perhaps they were frequenting different areas during these activities, or maybe they were doing these activities at different times of the day, which leads into the next point. Do some genders walk or cycle more often? So this step is where we also looked at some data, and we know that in Australia, women are already quite active walkers, but fears for their personal safety often prevent many girls and women from walking as much as they would like to. We also know that from previous Vic Health Indicators data, there are a number of findings that show the number of women who feel safe walking alone at night is less favourable in the city of Melton compared to some other Victorian municipalities. We know that for people who identify as LGBTQIA+, that number would be even less, as they often report feeling more unsafe in public settings than those that don't identify as part of that community. Our next step was thinking about other groups that would be affected by this particular plan, and people with mobility impairments and disability were identified. So this includes older adults, young children, and people with physical or mental disability and their carers. There was a decision to focus the GIA on women and people with mobility impairments and mental or physical disability. The next step was looking at what research informed our GIA. So like I said at the start, we completed this GIA before they did the consultation. So the team was looking at data from Victoria Walks and the Vic Health Indicators. The next step was thinking about which stakeholders to consult with. So because they were wanting to focus on women and people and carers with disability, they connected with departments at council who have connections with a wide range of community groups. And that includes the Disability Advisory Committee, the Transport Community Reference Group, and the local Heart Foundation walking groups, just to name a few. Our next step was looking at what we learned from the stakeholders in our consultation, and we'll look at some findings from the consultation in 2 slides' time. The next step in our GIA is our options analysis, and this is where we considered the benefits, costs, and risks associated with each of our options. So our first option was the targeted promotion to community groups such as women, older adults, females, and people with disability. And that is where connecting with our other teams at council who had those connections came in really handy. Our next option was to collect and review consultation data by gender. So making sure they were asking people what their gender was, and also looking at the consultation results through that lens to better understand the nuances of people's responses. And lastly, considering lighting from a gendered perspective was something that was identified as being really important. And we know that lighting has a large impact on perceptions of safety, especially for women and especially for people that identify as LGBTQIA+, as I mentioned earlier. The next step in our GIA was the recommendation. So our first recommendation was ensuring that the consultation for the plan reached diverse community members. As we are a very culturally diverse municipality in Melton, we need to ensure that we have an intersectional focus in our day-to-day work, and that's also a key component of our GIA. The next recommendation was looking at the consultation data through a gender and disability lens. So it's not enough to ask people their gender or their disability status. It's really important to analyse the results by gender and other demographic data if it's collected, and also really thinking about what is the purpose of collecting this data? What are we going to understand better if we ask people about their demographics? And our last recommendation was considering the lighting. So an example here, if we position a few lights on a path and hope that people will walk there, that's not going to be a quick fix to increase walkability. It's really important to consider the positioning of the light. So is the light coming from overhead or is it coming from the ground up? Is there a shadow that the light casts? How big is the shadow? And what is or isn't illuminated on the path? And we could spend a lot more time talking about this, but that's just some factors to consider when lighting is being discussed in open space with a gender lens across it. This is a snapshot of the responses from the consultation. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we almost had a 50-50 gender split in respondents. And the team was really pleased with that, as it's something that we don't often find in consultations. We often get a higher number of females responding. This may be because we did that targeted approach to trying to reach certain groups in the consultation. I'd like to say that is why, but I can't say for certain that is the case. In terms of the demographic data, they also provided an option for people that for them to say that they preferred not to say what their gender was. And you can see we had one respondent that selected that in the green down the bottom. And that is a bit of a limitation of the wording of that question, because it is prefer not to say, and it's not another category such as non-binary. We can't say for sure whether that respondent may identify as non-binary or maybe a different gender. It might have just been they didn't want to tell us, so we shouldn't be making assumptions about their gender in terms of this analysis. On the right-hand side, you can see the issues reported by gender. So for walking issues, we had a lot more females reporting these than males. And for cycling, we had a lot more males reporting these than females. Cycling issues, a lot more males reporting issues than females. So this may indicate that males feel safer cycling around the municipality than females. And there were some open text responses in the consultation that indicated that was actually the case. On the next slide, we'll go into some more detail about the type of issues by gender. So some of the things that jump out to me but when I look at this is the number of females reporting poor lighting or other walking facilities is considerably higher than males, which reinforces some of those statements that we made at the start of the GIA process. And that's over that side of the screen there. And also no place to cross. So it's much higher for females. And I can't help but wonder how many of those females were potentially trying to cross a road with children who may have been in a pram or on a bike. And as you know, it's not as safe or as easy to try and dash across a road if you've got your family in tow with you. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we had more males reporting no bike lanes than females was as an issue that came up. From this data here, we can't see if that actually deterred people from riding or if they continued to ride, even though they felt it wasn't safe. And I think that would be really interesting to see from a gendered perspective. And again, these are just some things to think about and this will inform which projects the engineering team prioritise for completion. In terms of next steps for the GIA, the team will be completing a deeper analysis of the consultation data by gender and disability. I'm sure you can appreciate they've had a lot of rich data that's come through and they're doing a really great job of sifting through all of that. They'll also be considering what sorts of images they use in the final plan. So for example, using images that challenge gender stereotypes, such as pictures of men pushing prams with small children, rather than having pictures of women pushing their children in the pram or on their bikes. And also ensuring that the images used in the plan feature people that are reflective of our community. So making sure there are people that look like they're different ages, different abilities, and of different ethnicities. And the last step there is reviewing the consultation process to determine what went well and what could be changed next time. And they're also going to continue to collect and gender disaggregated data from the community and also to analyse that data by gender and other demographic data where relevant. That's it from me. I can see there are a few questions in the Q&A, but if you would like to get in touch after the end of the presentation today, please feel free. That's my email on the screen there.
All right, thanks, Bonnie, for presenting. It was a very great presentation, very thorough, and it's good to see that the GIA process is very comprehensive, very detailed, and contacts a lot of different stakeholders from a wide range of groups. So let's move on to Q&A. Let me just share my screen again. So back to this one. Go. So our first question is from Danita Tucker. She asks, what sort of primary data collection did you have to undertake as part of the GIA?
That is a great question. So before we did the consultation, we looked at information from the Vic Health, which is an organisation that releases a lot of information on different health behaviours by municipality. So there was information about people's physical activity habits and active transport habits So we looked at that, and also from Victoria Walks. I'm not familiar with what the engineering team used, but I know there was data there that they used to start completing the GIA before going to the consultation.
Yeah. And a question from Daniel Dunstan. Are the benefits of GIA quantified for use in benefits realization and BCR for project outcomes to improve BCR projects that address GIA?
Can you tell me what BCR stands for, sorry?
So I'll let Daniel elaborate on that if I'm incorrect, but I imagine BCR stands for benefit cost ratio.
Great, thank you.
Whilst we wait for that, I'll go to the next question. Oh no, so he's clarified that that's, yes, benefit cost ratio.
It's a good question, Daniel. And I think one of the things that we're finding with the gender impact assessments is that I can make recommendations to my colleagues in engineering and other teams of what I think is best practice or what I think will be the most effective or the most appropriate. But it's really up to them to determine what they will go forward with. So I don't know that I can comment on that fully. That's just sort of, they took on board what I had said, but I mean, if we're wanting to go a bit further and be a bit more progressive with our recommendations, they are a bit more resource intensive and potentially more costly. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's sort of how I would see it from my point of view.
Yeah, and then moving to the next one from Catherine Norton. Did the plan consider the capacity/planned improvements for primary and secondary school students to walk, scoot, or cycle safely to school to reduce the burden on mum's taxi that limits work opportunities for women? And similarly, does council offer new part-time professional roles for women, others with caring responsibilities or disabilities?
Yes, great. Another great question, Catherine. So the plan, I feel like I don't know enough about the pedestrian and cyclist plan to answer that one, but it is something that came up when we were talking about how people are getting around the municipality. Like I said, we are a growth area, so we're constantly thinking about how can we ensure that people are getting to school in a safe way without having to be dropped off and reducing car dependence. And the second part of your question, does council offer new part-time professional roles for women? Yes, we do at our council. So we're really trying to offering a flexible work approach for people of all genders, but recognising that we know that women often have the main caregiving responsibilities.
Yep. And then from Kate Greenwood, we have, did you look at gender differences in driving and parking? So while we want people to walk and cycle more, sometimes these initiatives impact parking accessibility. Has this come up in your GIA?
Thanks for that question, Kate. So there were some responses in the open text response about parking, but most of our GIA focused on people walking and cycling, but that you've raised a really good point and something for us to think about going forward.
Yeah, and then we have a question from Prue, which was somewhat similar to one of our earlier questions. Women are undertaking a much larger proportion of caregiving duties in Australia. These women have high needs for active transport because they do more of the pickups and drop-offs. They have much higher needs for protection when they are traveling with children. Has this been considered in the GIA? And is this an area for future consideration? I find a lot of women do not feel safe traveling with their children during the day.
Thanks, Prue. So yes, that actually came up quite a bit when it was talking about the issues reported by gender. A number of women or females were saying that they'd experienced there was congested traffic at school pickups, that they felt they couldn't park the car anywhere and that it was too busy, as you're saying, to walk there. Like it was quite congested, and incidents of road rage also were being reported. And we didn't have that with any of the male respondents. No one mentioned about congestion at school pickup or road rage incidents. So that was an interesting observation that we made in the consultation. And it is something that we definitely are thinking about as well. going forward, that we do need to make sure that people are feeling safe at all times of the day in all areas of the community.
Yeah. Next question from Vicky Hu. Was public transport connectivity with active modes also considered as part of the assessment? Walking and cycling is often not the sole mode of transport in journeys, particularly for women who tend to make multiple stops or travel outside of peak hours compared to journeys which men make.
It was, Vicky. It wasn't a major focus because our public transport connectivity out here is quite poor. And I think there was a decision I feel like there was a decision not to have that as a core focus because of the consultation, because we didn't really want to skew what people may say, like really focusing on that we don't have enough public transport. We know that's the case, and that's not, as I've been told, it's not really something that council can influence on their own. It's something they do need to do in conjunction with state government, but it's definitely something that council is aware of.
Yeah, and we have one last question from Max McCardle, who asks, how many GIAs has Melton City Council done, and are any of these publicly available?
We've completed 25 to date, Max, and they're not publicly available at the moment, but we are looking at doing some case studies that we can hopefully share across council and in time externally with other organisations.
Okay, so I mentioned it was the last one, but we've just got two more that just popped up. One for Ilse Malagamba. Did Melton integrate intersectionality into the GIA, or how was it determined when this was appropriate to integrate into the analysis of data?
Yes, so we did. I can't remember exactly all the demographic data that was asked of respondents, but we definitely, the focus of the GIA was about gender and disability status. So we definitely asked those, and just making sure that when we were looking at the responses, we were looking at it by demographic data. So going, okay, the age, that was another thing that was asked, disability status, gender, and making sure that when the tasks are prioritized, that those intersectional factors are taken into consideration. And yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I found from this is just making sure that everyone is looking at the consultation data by the different intersectional factors and different demographics.
Yeah, and we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Are there any lessons learned from the process, or if you are doing it again, are you doing anything differently?
There are lots of lessons. I feel like every time we do a GIA, there's something new. Just off the top of my head, trying to think. I think, sorry, there was something before that I was going to say. Sorry, I'm just got out of mind. Can we come back to that question? Sorry, I've had a little brain.
Yeah, we can circle back to that one. We've got one from Annette Chrome. So what would be examples of other GIAs? For which areas were they done?
There's been quite a few. We've done some in our finance areas on our fees and charges policy. We've done one on our domestic animal management plan in local laws. We've done one on a placemaking plan, which is our city design and strategy plan. We've done quite a few in community services, so recreation, community planning, people and culture. There's been quite a mix of examples. I won't list all 25, but they're the ones that come to mind at the moment.
Yeah, and another anonymous question. Is there a GIA tool that we can use to do our own assessments?
There definitely is, and I can share that with you. There's the Commission for Gender Equality in the Public Sector has created a gender impact assessment toolkit, and it's on their website. And I can pop it in the chat at the end of today. And I was just going to go back to that other question about, are there lessons learned from the process or things you're doing differently? And I think involving other team members in engineering or teams that I've been working with is a good way to go and to build the capacity to ensure everyone's on the same page with what we're trying to do and trying to get across. Because while I have one really great colleague that I work with really closely on this, I think it's would be more beneficial if more people could be involved. But I know that that's always not possible due to resourcing and things like that. But I think that's one of the biggest learnings from this process.
Yeah, so that's all the questions we've got. So I'll move on from here unless we get another question in the next couple minutes. So just moving on to closing. Bonnie, I'd like to thank you again on behalf of all of ITE-ANZ and all the attendees here for taking the time out of your day to come and present to us. And also I'd like to thank all the attendees for tuning in, taking the time out of your day to watch and attend these webinars, because it's very valuable for us, very valuable for our presenters as well. If you do have requests for future webinars, we'd love to hear all about it. We're always open to new ideas, new concepts. So please feel free to reach out via our socials down the bottom, and we'll hope to see you all again next time.